At our Q&A session during our New York Virtual UX conference, several attendees asked Jakob Nielsen to give his thoughts on how the field of UX will change due to the current pandemic and which industries may experience increased demand for UX.
Evolution doesn't stop, or technology evolution doesn't stop, and so there will be new things invented. What will be the big things in 5 years? That's hard to say, but there will be something. That's, I think, is pretty much guaranteed. I think that in the shorter term, so while this COVID pandemic is happening, I think the kind of realistic expectation is probably that we're all going to be about 30% poorer than we were before, just because everything works much more. First, a lot of companies are closed, right? And secondly, even the people who are not closed, but they're working from home, for most people, it's just not nearly as productive. And so as an overall impact on the world, everybody's about 30% poorer. But even though that sounds not so nice, truth is that 30% poorer, that means like in the US, we're back to where we were instead of standard of living about 20 years ago. 20 years ago, Don and I had already started Nielsen Norman Group. We were operating and we did good projects. Or in Europe, maybe it's like how it was 30 years ago. Well, I lived in Copenhagen 30 years ago, and that was pretty nice back then. So it's not necessarily so bad to be reduced in your standard of living by 30%. There's still UX, there's still user experience, there's still design going on. There was back when we were at that level of income before. I mean, it's certainly very bad for developing countries. That's a very different and very sad story, right? I mean, I think the expectation is that about 300 million people in the world will be reduced to extreme poverty who had otherwise escaped. The happiest news for the last 20 years is like 1 billion people got out of extreme poverty. But now about 300 million are going to get back into that because of the economic slowdown. And so that's not so happy. But if you just think about, and so maybe about 50 million people will die because of reduced, economic circumstances. But that's in the developing world. In the rich world, being 30% poorer doesn't mean we die, right? It just means that we are back to where we were before. And that is a little bit bad for UX, because UX is partly a luxury, and it's only partly, but people can more afford to demand high quality, which means great user experience, when they're rich. And so when they're 30% poorer, it's going to get a little bit more back to basics and let me just get stuff that works rather than stuff that works well. But I do think that it's a little bit different than to say, well, we're going to be back to where we were 20 years ago, back when we were 30 years ago, because there has been those 30 years and those 20 years. They have happened. People have experienced that. So they've gotten used to higher quality products. So I think that even if they're poorer, they will still like higher quality products. And so I still think that there will be that need for user experience to create, high quality in different type of interactions. But also remember that that's only half of what UX does, is create higher quality. The other half of what UX does is create higher productivity. And that is, in fact, one of the ways we can get the world economy back again, is that we can have higher productivity. And so right now, the main productivity challenge is this entire work from home scenario, where people are not as productive as they used to be. And that is, I think there's many reasons to that, but one of the reasons is certainly relates to things like what the different software tools are. And so we have not had as much maybe attention on collaboration software in the past, but now it's become a much more critical thing. And so that could be worthy of a lot more UX attention. And just all the things that we've always done in terms of improved productivity are still going to be more so in demand. The poorer companies are, the more they will want to crank out results. And therefore they should anyway invest more actually rather than less in UX. The more it becomes critical for them to have high productivity and increase their value. But again, it goes back to, we had to argue for that or demonstrate that if you do better design in our way of thinking of what's better design, you're actually going to get more output, which I believe is true. But I mean, it's not everybody believes that, so we have to keep arguing that point. I think that's even more so true in this scenario. And this scenario is, after all, it's going to continue for, it's hard to say how many years, but 2 years work from home scenario, probably something like that before. If we're lucky, we get a good vaccine, right? Most people say that's about 1.5 to 2 years away. So that's a long time. So we kind of say, well, let it keep going. No, we got to go make it better. And that's our field. We know how to make knowledge work better.
Thank you. And I think we might have time just for this one last question that came in just kind of around what industries do you think will experience some sort of increased demand for UX in the future?
Well, in the very short term future, I would say is probably something like the work from home and collaboration software, because that really can have a lot of big improvements. But other than that, I do think that a lot of sort of entertainment oriented areas can benefit a lot from increased, better, improved UX. And that I think is our one of our next frontiers. It's always video games. We've always sort of partly, I would say, conquered or turned around to the UX thinking. There's a lot of games research, games usability type of activity, because the games people, they used to be very against this. They used to be, okay, the hardcore gamers, they all care only about like, oh, so boom boom boom, shoot the monsters or whatever. But after a while, they discovered that if people can figure out how to shoot the monster, why, if I'm shooting like this and not shooting like that, it works. That makes the game much more enjoyable. And so in recent years, I would say recent is maybe the last 10 years or so, there's been a lot of emphasis on, they don't necessarily always call it usability and so on, but sort of on interaction research in the games industry. So now we just need to kind of broaden that into a broader set of it's something called experience economy. So it just needs to like make that extra twisted experience and user experience. I really just, they're the same really. So we just need to have our style of approach adopted there.